Hi everyone, I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan. Welcome to Game Analysis with the Grandmaster. For today's session, I hope you're all doing good. You've had a great start to our summer. Plenty of good things going on. I see Dinesh is saying you saw a Chess-Based India art video. We had a Chess-Based India video, or we had a Chess-Based India article. That is true. Sagar Shah, International Master Sagar Shah, is doing a great job for chess, and he has brought so many tournaments. I guess I'm pretty sure everybody has seen videos of Chess-Based India. It's so popular. And when Coach Anu went to India, he did a nice video about our academy, which was pretty nice. Okay, so I guess what I thought we'll do is do a small puzzle rush while we're waiting. Usually it takes a few more minutes before we start, so why not start with the fun? By the way, I was trying something out, I guess, before this too. Let's try a puzzle rush. Obviously, I'm not super fast with my mouse, but I'm going to try to see. Let's do a small 3-minute puzzle battle. I'm usually very slow with my mouse, but let's. Okay. I think I consistently get something like 35 or something like that. Let's see if I can beat my 35 record with you guys looking and helping me, maybe. What do we have here? Queen G8 check picks up the rook. Okay, we got the back rank checkmate. Okay, so that should be check, check, and we pull in a checkmate on H8. Okay. You have to attack the pinned piece. Okay, let's do a little bit of a skewer here. We have a checkmate in one. How do we checkmate? Wait, that's not a checkmate. Wait, I'm on check, so I have to stop that. Okay, this is not that fast. Okay, let's capture this. Okay, pick up that rook. They want me to trade it. By the way, I'm just doing this for a little bit of a fun, guys. It's just us hanging out here and getting ready. Trying to see if you guys being with me can bring in any good luck. Okay, in me to solve more puzzles. Okay, so we got a nice little fork here. What do? We want to win this one? And why can't I just take this? Okay, let's just do that. Okay, so that seems like a discard attack. The worst part about this is that I don't get to see how many puzzles I've done. It might also be the best part, in my opinion, because a lot of times I see what is going on in how many puzzles I've done. It kind of puts me at a bad situation. Maybe I'll do this first, and then I have check, check. So sometimes not knowing how many puzzles you have done might help you. So I'm hoping that's the case with us here. So what do I take? I can take on d5 maybe. Yeah, that looks. Ooh, I missed that. I don't know how we. Okay, I'll take on d1 and then I'll take on a6. Okay, so that should lead to a winning the rook. What do we have here? Okay, so let's just take this and then do a double attack and take this guy. Okay, so I can start with e5 and then probably queen f2 is mate. Yep. Oh, okay guys, that's 2 mistakes already. I don't want to mess up any more. Okay, this has to be this. Why can't I just, oh, okay, just pick up the rook. Knight f3 check seems to be winning. Ah, that was not so good. Ryan thinks I'm slow. I missed bishop takes e8. I don't know which one I missed. I don't know what about this one. Knight f3 check. I guess rook takes f3 happens. So that was my mistake in this one. Queen f7. Vidit Gujarati streams on YouTube. Yeah, Vidit Gujarati is awesome, by the way, guys. I've seen actually a lot of these. I mean, Nakamura, you probably have seen. He's like a beast. He goes so fast. When I'm doing my puzzle rush or anything, I feel like I'm a complete amateur. But you know, some of these guys are super fast. In fact, I recently saw a video in which Tani The kid from who was very popular and has done really well. The kid from New York, who's from a refugee camp and stuff like that, who's doing really well with chess. Um, he went toe to toe with Nakamura, and that was just a lot of fun. I thought that was pretty cool. And then, in fact, if I remember right, maybe even beat him in some of the puzzle battles. Ryan wants to challenge me in a puzzle battle. Do we have time for one more? We have enough. Maybe in the end of this, Ryan. I like the idea. I think I want to do a puzzle battle with you guys. But I would say we are already like 7 minutes into this, and I want to get the game analysis going. Because if possible, I would like to do more than one game. That's what we did. All right, guys. So let's get started with the question. Again, I don't ask too many difficult questions. If you have a couple of things just to let you know, if you've already had a game analyzed, you could still do it. But if someone has never done it, I would probably prefer that. But again, if you're able to answer it, if you're able to get in, absolutely fine. But one thing though is make sure you have a game ready. I want you to email me your game. You have my email address right on the top right here. You should be able to see the email address. Make sure that you have your game ready. All right. Here is a question for today's game analysis. Should not be very difficult. Which world champion came back to win a lot of rematches? The most rematches won by a world champion. Let's see who can answer this question to get their games analyzed. Simple question. You should know the basics. Which world champion had the most amount of rematches? Okay, so I see a couple of answers coming through. Luis and Ryan both have answered. I guess Sriram and Sai are going with Capablanca. Unfortunately, no. Capablanca did want a rematch, which I believe he never got. Alakine was smart in that. He never allowed him to do that. Raghav was saying Mikhail Botvinnik, I guess. Close enough, Raghav. Close enough with the spelling. But yes, Botvinnik is the answer, and Luis is the first one to answer. Luis and Ryan. In fact, let's see if I can get 2 games analyzed. You both send me your games. And I know both of you have gotten your games analyzed, but that's still good. You're able to answer the questions. You on the right. Rest of you got to read up more on your game, on your chess history, people. It's all about world champions and famous chess stuff that I keep talking about. You guys have to read a little bit more. Okay, let's start with, Coach Luis. If you can send me the email, please let me know. Sai, we'll all get a chance. Let's see if this is done. I'll try to do. I'll try to see if I can analyze anyone's extra games, if possible. But don't worry about it. Remember this: it's not necessary that it's your game that needs to be analyzed. You have a game analysis with all of us together, and that's the kind of thing that I want to do, right? I want you guys to be engaged in this analysis, ask questions. I'm sure I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, and in my past streams, I've noticed that. See, I'm doing live analysis. I'm not checking the computer. And obviously I'm going to make some mistakes, but it's just a casual thing that I'm trying to build here. I'm not exactly getting the most perfect answer, but just getting the quality of game analysis and the process of game analysis. All right, Luis is getting his game. So let's see, Luis, we have a few minutes, and after that I need to make sure that we get the game and go on. So make it as fast as you can. Let's see, game sent. Let's check if we can get Luis's game. In the meantime, I guess we can switch this to our regular board, which I still prefer. Awesome, we got our regular board. I'm just getting the game from Luis. Copy game. All right, we got the game ready. I guess it's time for us to get started. What language do I code on? Dinesh is asking me a very interesting question. Dinesh, I haven't done any coding in a long time. I guess to give the background for what Dinesh is asking me from chat, I do have a master's in computer science from University of Texas at Dallas. I did get my chess scholarship. So I actually came to US on a chess scholarship to do my undergrad and my grad. graduate studies in the University of Texas at Dallas. By the way, a great school. They gave me a full scholarship, and they still have an awesome program. I think they have a fantastic balance between studying and doing chess. Now they have like all GM teams anyways. I mean, most of the college teams are all GM teams. But I think to answer that question, Dinesh, I haven't really done any coding. I don't maintain our website. We have people who do that. I just stick to chess these days. Okay. Well, you love computer science. I know a lot of people who love computer science and chess. I think they both have a lot in common. So that's an excellent thing. Keep up your interest in both and keep working on both. All right. We are going to jump into our game analysis. Luis is playing white against ck Jawahar. And I think both players are rated around 2000. And Luis, you can give us any background of the game if you want to. Do you see my thing? Let's see what Ryan is saying. Ryan is showing me something from Lee Chess. Okay, Ryan, we will go over this game, and if we have enough time, we're going to go over your game, okay? Well, the game analysis, AK is asking if this is suitable for you. I will try to explain as many questions as possible, but some of them might be a little complicated, but some of them might be good for you. So that's a good question. The game analysis is supposed to be a little generic, so I try to keep it in such a way that everybody gets something from it, right? And also, if some of these analyses are fast, you can always pause it and replay it later on too, okay? So Coach Luis is playing white, and it's apparently a 15-minute game from Chess24, and he's playing someone very similar rating to him. By the way, Luis, you have to start sending me some games that you lost to. That's where I will be able to help you the most. All right, let's go on with the game. We have a we have a regular Queen's Gambit declined, and regular opening moves so far. Okay, e4. So knight f3, I guess, is more common, and knight f6 is also more common for black. So e4, a6. Okay, so basically black is not fighting for anything here in the center. I'm not so sure what the theory is. Let's just quickly check that. So one thing I don't take a chance is opening in explaining what you guys need to know, because openings are an ocean, and they are something that you really have to know. There's no point in trying to figure out the moves in opening, because everything is pretty much done and you guys should just check it out. And I mean, I usually use the reference database in my chess base, and that's all you need to know. By the way, d takes e4 is a main move and bishop b4 is a main move. What I'm seeing here is these two are the main possible moves for black, and what black played was not the best. That's all we need to know. Moving on. So pawn a6 and knight f3. Harish is here. Nice to see you, Harish. Bishop to b4. Pawn takes, and e5. So this looks very natural, and this kind of space is very, very dangerous usually, right? Because what this means is that white has a majority on the kick side, and I usually think this is a dangerous space for black, because if at some point the pawn starts rolling, it's basically game over, right? The only counter has to come from this side, and at this point it doesn't seem super easy, right? All right, so let's see. Knight e7 and bishop to d3. Semi-Slav, I actually don't know the exact name. Usually the e6 d6, I mean e6 c6 knight f6 is semi-Slav, but here knight f6 was never played, so that's the only question I would say is would be different. The regular Slav is just this typical d4 d5 c4 c6. All right, going on with the game, knight e7, castle and castle. Okay, so one thing I am already thinking about is to trade the pieces, and I've talked about this to all of us. I mean, my focus on game analysis is just the general middle game understanding. Oh, Luis has an update. It's called the triangle defense. Ooh, interesting. Triangle defense. Okay, cool. Well, I'll trust you on that, Luis. So that sounds like a very interesting opening. Bishop f5 is something that I would really consider doing here. In terms of positional play, I think that's an important move. Does anyone can anyone tell me why I think this is a good move? Or even, in fact, I might think it's a good idea for white to stop that. I don't mind playing an important move, queen c2, to stop that too, because that's a move you need to deal with. Can anyone think of why? Why is this bishop trade something important that I'm talking about right now. Let's see who has an answer to this one. Black bishop is bad. I wouldn't really call this bishop completely bad yet. There are some bishops that are okay, but in the end game, yes, this could be a bad bishop. But you know what, Dinesh, good point. This bishop is super dangerous. I have to tell you again, black has to be super careful in this position. I mean, this bishop followed by this bishop, followed by this knight. I mean, I'm thinking that, and also add this pawn. Remember, the pawn is the most important thing because that pawn is the key space. You have a lot of extra space. So I think bishop f5 is necessary to neutralize the attack, right? So what happens after bishop f5? Takes, let's say takes, or of course he allows me to take. What happens here is that at least the light squares are not like super bad. You're at least able to hold on to the light squares. And I've talked about the blocks of squares and how it's important to keep track of them. I have dark squared pawns and I have a dark squared bishop, right? Which means I'm going to dominate on the dark squares, not necessarily control the light squares, right? And that's why it's really not a bad option for black to do that trade. So Louis is saying he missed that. The bishop on d3 is super strong and you have to take care of it. Froggo the Doggo, I think I know you, but I don't remember exactly who this is. If you want to tell me who you're, I also know most of the students by your ID, but some of you I don't. But if you're not, let me know. So a3, bishop takes and pawn takes. So here, again, maybe Louis, you want to start with queen c2 to stop this move. I mean, this position is looking so good that I'm already thinking, can I sacrifice? I don't know if you consider doing that. Maybe too premature. Yeah. So I was just thinking if I can do bishop h6, g8, and queen d2. But I think black king will just go up to support. Oh, Vishwas. Yes, Vishwas. Hey, Vishwas. So, okay, let's go on with the game. a3, bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3. Again, only hope is bishop f5 and looks like black played it. Not bad. I think now at least the position is reasonable. It's not where black is probably going to resign very quickly. Queen to d7. Interesting. I think he's bringing his queen to e6 and followed by knight d7. Okay. Solidifying. So I feel like the game is a very simple plan for white. And the plan for white, like I already talked about, is a simple pawn roll. Right? If you want to come up with a plan in a game, you should always pay attention to the key aspects in a position. And that's important for me in terms of planning, right? You cannot just think, oh, I want to play on the queen side. I want to attack my opponent's king. You cannot do such things, right? So your strength here is this pawn. And that's why white should play for a pawn roll. And I think you need to keep that pawn. So let's see if Louis was able to maintain that. I like that move. I think f4 and f5 is coming up. And I think if I'm black, I would probably think of playing f5 at some point and really trying to close this position down. Probably important. Queen e6, rook e3. So looks like rook e3 and a rook lift. I like that. Let's say white plays f4. Who can tell me a good move for black? I think black's move's almost, in my opinion, forced. Otherwise, black is going to run into super difficulty. Let's see who can tell me a good move for black. Tactics and calculation is always part of your thinking, but it also is part of your long-term moves. Good. Luis, Raghav, you're coming with f5. Very good. I like that. Right. The point of f5 is just that now white is in a temporary situation where e takes f6 is not possible, which means you've at least managed to close things down. By the way, this is not really a great situation for white if you go to an endgame, right? Particularly if I can place one of my knights to e6, that'll be a fantastic blockade, and black might even start playing for an advantage, right? So you should just know that. So rook e3 I like, because when f1 moves, I would think about taking it. So at this point, I still feel white should target for an attack. 4 pieces on that king definitely means that you should go for an attack. All right, let's see what happens. Rook e3, knight to g6. Capturing on g6, Luis, I'm not a fan. Why not? Why not knight f5? Can we not play knight f5? Because I think if you play knight f4, fair enough, that's something that I need to worry about. Maybe I can just move back. And I don't see any immediate problems because g6 always is met with knight captures h6. So that's not a problem. And now there is also this discovered attack on the knight. So I would think that the knight on f5 is of huge value. I'm not so sure if I would part with that. I think once you play rook g3 now, again, black is facing serious trouble. A combination of space and active pieces is always going to be a problem, right? And a lot of people ask me this, and I talk to my students about this. One of the biggest driving factor for an attack is space. Just remember that pawn on e5 is driving everything. Most of black's defenses are not possible because of that pawn on e5. So I think knight f5 would have been very strong. You should have done that. And also, the reason why I don't like this is I think now your pawns are going to be blockaded. What you have done is you have left yourself with this situation. And you've also created a situation which might not have an attack anymore. See, if this knight, well, right now I don't have a clear path to get here. But let's say here, here, and here. If black gets the knight to e6, and let's say the queens get traded, black still has a very reasonable path to a good game here, right? Clearly, it'll be more of an end game and a strategic play for black, right? You might think this is a bad pawn structure, but it is solving black's problems. Think about this. If you go f4 and g4 and f5, again, it's not immediate. It's going to take some time to do that. Obviously, if you play f4 right now, black will just take the pawn, right? But the problem is now I have set up 2 pawns to deal with that, right? So it's really not easy for you to push f5. You've opened up the rook as well. So black basically is happy to ruin his pawn structure a little bit to stop your plan of going f4, g4, and f5, right? So rook g3 was played, king h7, h4. I guess queen f5 has to be played, and looks like he didn't play the most important move. Queen f5 I think is almost necessary. I don't see what queen f7 is dominating. So I guess Raga wants to play queen f7, but I am not a fan of queen f7, Raga. One is this is not a time to go back for an attack. I know you're trying to attack this pawn, but I might just play h5. I think it's more important that, or actually I might even play rook f3 followed by h5. So there are multiple options. I'll just show h5, for example. H5, you play queen captures, f2 check. I just move over. Now that pawn is mine, right? Now that pawn seems to pose more of a problem than anything else, right? Let's say queen here, pawn captures, pawn check. And now your king is going to be in a very awkward position. You have to go back, let's say king g8. By the way, king, I mean, you can also go king h8, but there you have to watch out for moves like rook to f3. There is a check on h5, which means you can still survive. But overall, what I would say is, I mean, white's attack has kind of improved. Hopefully, you guys can see the fact that the white's attacking even in a better place with the pawn on g6. So that seems like a bigger unnecessary risk. So if you're black here, you should just try to stop white's attack. Now, more importantly, Louis, I mean, you looked at queen f7, but more importantly, what is black's goal? I actually always talk about this. If you're playing a game, if you have a plan or a strategy, it's important to ask this question. What is your dream position? Like, what is your dream position as black? What is your dream position as white? And when you ask these questions, that's when there's a struggle that's happening. So white's dream position, if you ask me, is to play f4, g4 and achieve f5. If I get one pawn on f5, one pawn on e5, I think that's white's dream position. White is completely destroying black at that time, right? I would think that's completely game over almost. Now, what is black's dream position? I think I kind of showed something. That is, this knight is going to end up on e6. Queens are traded off, right? And maybe rook on f7 is keeping an eye on this pawn. Now, I won't push any of these pawns yet. Remember that. These are all solid pawns. I won't touch them yet. First, I'll set up the blockade with my knight. I will double up my rooks. So my rooks are attacking on the f file, defending on the b file. then slowly I will start expanding on the queen side. Remember that black's idea is still to play on the majority side, which is on the queen side. So overall, sorry, let's get rid of that arrow. What you need is you need some kind of a dream position that you're thinking about all the time, okay? So pawn on a4 for black, that's a good point, Ryan. If you do that, basically you're fixing one more pawn. Every pawn being fixed would be really, really nice. But Ryan, when you play a5, you're running the risk of allowing a4. You should also remember that. If you can, you should get to a4. Perfect. That's a good point. All right, let's move on. h5 is not a good move, and I think all of you should know that in terms of pawn structure. You have a double pawn, and I'll tell you when the double pawns are really bad. Double pawns are bad when the square in front of them is not, it cannot be defended by your own pawn. If you give a square in front of the double pawns to your opponent, that's just pretty bad double pawns. And that's why, actually let's move it back. I don't think these are so bad. Why? Because as long as you have a pawn on h6, you're still guarding g5. There's no blockade. You're not killing those pawns. And I think you're still doing pretty good, right? But the real problem happens when you play a move like h5. I think at this point, you're really just giving up too many squares. I think g5 is just too weak, okay? So moving on with the game, let's see, rook g5 was played. Okay, maybe bishop g5 would be nice. But rook g5, strong idea. I think I just realized that, you know, he's trying to take on h5. So Luis is trying to take on h5 with a pin. I think black's move is almost forced with rook f5, which is what is played. a4, rook takes g5. Again, I think black's kind of forgotten a couple of important pieces that need to get out. Rook takes g5, bishop takes g5, and knight d7. I have to say, white is probably better here, but it's still not over for black. I mean, again, the weakness in light squares that white has is just too much. e6, f5, g4. None of the light squares are guarded. It's very difficult. Maybe at least you can guard g4. I think light squares are super weak. a5. Okay, you're fixing this pawn, but you're also fixing this one. So this is a kind of tricky scenario. So I'll tell you when a5 can be super good. If the rooks stay on the board, queens stay on the board, and I can attack this pawn. But I'll tell you when a5 can become super bad. Let's say the rooks and the queens get traded, and you're only left with this, bishop. Let's say bishop versus knight. Now what happens is that a5 is nothing but a pure weakness, right? That becomes super weakness. I mean, the bishop can do nothing. Every single pawn is on a light square. So the bishop is pretty useless against these pawns, right? So the only thing black needs to be trying to do right now, trying to achieve, is to kind of go into a knight versus bishop endgame after a5. But I don't think that's easy. So in Louis, your defense, I think a5 is still pretty interesting because this is still a weak pawn and it's not easy to get rid of that. c5 seems like an active response from your opponent. Okay, I don't see anything immediately bad with it. So let's keep moving. Rook b1 and c4. Okay, this has got to be interesting. Now we have a separation between this pawn group and this pawn group, and this pawn is still a weakness. So let's see. Ryan saying a5 is not good when you trade queens. Even if you trade queens and if you have the rook on the board, Ryan, I still think white is not going to be in any serious trouble. But I think if rooks and queens both get traded, then I would think that white would be in serious trouble. That's when white would be in, not serious trouble. White would lose any chances to play for a win and continuously play at that point in a defensive way. So c4, queen c2, b5. So I guess black immediately is trying to get rid of this. The only problem I have with what black is doing here is black is opening up the position too much. I mean, this pass pawn I actually think is great for black. But the only worry I have is this open file and how this king might face any trouble in this game. Otherwise, I still think this is interesting. Let's go on. Queen b2, knight d7, queen a3. Okay. So I guess a5. Ooh, why not? Why not a5? Let's try something like a5 and see what happens here. I think we should try to play this out to some extent to see how white can break through. I think this pawn is super dangerous. See, when you have a pawn set like this, you know that this bishop is definitely not going to defend that pawn. When that pawn goes to like closer to a1 or a3, already the bishop is useless against that pawn. So at this point, a5 makes a lot more sense. Let's see what could white play after a5. I mean, of course, you can play rook b5, but I'm not so sure if rook b5 is so threatening. Bishop to e7, oops, is what Luis is saying he wanted to play. Okay, I don't mind bishop to e7, but even let's say I play a4. And you go bishop to b4, I guess, if you want to, or you can send your rook in first if you want to. But no matter what, I just think that the a pawn is your counterplay, right? I mean, what is black trying to do here? Black is basically saying, you know what? I have too many weaknesses. And at some point, white can come in and just finish the game off, right? So what's your kind of insurance at that point? What do you have as black to counter that? The only thing that you have is this. So I think a5 and a4 was kind of necessary to play. But this knight is still stuck though. Like I said, I really want this to happen, but it's becoming increasingly impossible to achieve that. So I would still think white is probably much better because the knight is so awkwardly placed and white's pieces are much better placed. Black's only chance is if he trades off the queen and rook, like I talked about, right? Actually, in this case, just trading off the queen might already create some chances, but clearly black wants to trade off queen and rook to go into a bishop versus knight endgame. But I don't like what black did. Rook f8 seems a little bit like a cheapo. So if white takes, oh, I can't take on a6. What am I talking about? For some reason I thought a6 was hanging. a6 is not even hanging. Okay, so rook f8 I guess is to attack here, but I really don't think black has any attack on the f file. I mean, it's a total waste of time. So he should have just focused on creating counterplay with the a file. Rook b7, rook here, and queen d6. Yeah, so now I can see what white is trying to do. Luis is doing a good job. He's going to win this pawn, right? If the queens get traded off, previously that rook behind that pawn was like a huge threat. Like I told you, that pawn moving up, I could even sacrifice a knight because this bishop was not easily going to defend that pawn. So now it seems like it's pretty lost for black. I really don't see how black can defend this. Look at this knight. I really like how you dealt with the knight, Luis. It's like a classic Fischer time and out bishop versus knight, even though that's a very different position. But I think I want to give the example because a bad knight against a good bishop, right? So this is also a good example. Typically, when you see these pawns, you would say this is a bad bishop in an endgame. And I want people to understand that a bad bishop cannot be so easily declared just because pawns are fixed in the same color, right? What I would say is this has the potential to make it a bad bishop. Again, if queens and rooks got traded, that would be a really bad bishop. And there are scenarios where those fixed pawns can make your bishop or pieces really bad. But here, I think the piece is really good. a5 was played. Okay, so you played bishop e7 to go after the knight. Okay, makes sense. I think white is winning just in any possible way. Probably rook a7 is winning because I don't see how black will save this one and this one. Everything seems to be hanging. Should be lost. But okay, bishop e7 seems to win also because after knight f6, d7, yeah? Wait. D7 is a classic situation where the pawn might become too much. So for example, d7. Yeah, I mean, d7 is pretty useless here. Rook a7 was played. I think that's pretty good that Luis played rook a7. But I was just going to show you why d7 kind of move is not so good. Ridhima got rook a7. Good job. 2 reasons. I'll tell you why d7 is bad for 2 reasons. 1, I just take the bishop. You promote to a queen. I take this pawn. And this is not super obvious that white's winning. So you really don't need to get from that position to this one, right? From that position to this one is not a good transition. Even though here white is the one who's playing for a win, I really don't think this is the best you could have gotten, right? You should be very clear with your evaluation. The second reason why I don't like this is also probably even better is if I take this one. This pin is strong enough with this pawn, and I think this will just maybe even winning. Well, not winning. This should be a draw because you have to play this, and I will continue to keep pushing this pawn. At some point, you have to abandon your bishop to take the pawn, giving black the piece back. So I just think... So given that rook a7 is what you played, Luis, I think rook a7 without bishop e7 would have been better. So you think about this. If you play this, the knight doesn't even get to move, right? Because there is a pin. And that pin is taking care of knight's movement. So why allow your opponent to even play that extra move when you can stop it, right? So let's see. Bishop e7 followed by rook a7 was played. Okay, knight e4. So now he's trying to create some counterplay, but I don't see how it is because after it takes, okay, d7. So now I think this is pretty much sealed. The pawn's queening, rook takes and queen. Now the deal is different. I think there is only one piece for a queen, and I don't even think that should be a big deal. All right, I'm just going to go through the rest of the game pretty fast because I don't see a point of us really spending time on analyzing this. But Luis says he was in time pressure here. Luis, whatever the time pressure is, this should be over. Wait, I think we are missing a simple winning move. Who can tell me a move for white just to instantly win the game maybe? What should white play here? White is winning, says Ridhima. Lots of moves. Yes, rook a8 is the simplest move. I think when you have extra material, finish it off. That's correct, Ryan. Rook a8. The checkmate is kind of obvious. So the only move, I guess, is g5. There's nothing else that black can play. I mean, there is no checkmate on g8, I guess. I'll just simply take the pawn if I'm playing white. By the way, there's a small lag, I guess. So when I ask a question and you guys type in, there might be a little bit of a lag there. But okay. Looks like this is a total winning situation for white. So let's see. Did Luis mess up enough for us to have some fun? That's what I want to check. Okay, finally rook a8 has been played. Good. g5. Queen g8 check. Okay, so are we not finishing this off? Ooh, maybe just take the pawn, Luis. Maybe just take the pawn. I think, you know, knight f6 is coming, so why allow that, right? Or maybe just play queen g6 check, so the knight f6 move cannot be played because the rook will get captured. Looks like queen e6 just wins because after queen king h7, queen f5. And I'm going to finish off with rook h8. It's almost impossible for me to stop that, right? It's just not happening. Okay. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time. Okay, fair enough. Wait, how is the game going so much even after this? Okay, I'm not going to see this anymore. All right, so that's the game. Luis was playing white. I guess to summarize the games, that's actually a good thing. I've talked to my students. If some of you are here, you already know. Giving a summary of a game in words is actually good. And there is a YouTube series I started. I've posted one video on that in our thing already. It's called strategic thinking or strategy. I got confused with the two words. Strategy, what it does is you can explain the game in words. That means you understood the game. So for example, this game, I can try to explain it. So out of the opening, white gained space with e5, and that gave a kingside majority and a possible kingside attack. But black was able to manage a trade-off of light square bishop that gave some chance for black to defend by controlling the light squares. But finally, the bigger problem happened when black actually opened up the queen side too much. That allowed white to get in. Rook b1 and rook b7 eventually is the one that made the difference. And the knight against the bishop, of course, I have to add that. The knight was completely dominated by the bishop, but there was a very thin line there, though. If the knight had gotten to e6, and if the major pieces got traded, It would have been a completely other way around story where the knight would have dominated the bishop. All right. I guess the next person to get that answer right was Ryan. So I'm just going to go with Ryan. Ryan, do you have a game? If you do, if you sent me a game, I might be able to just pull it up directly and look at your game. That was a good one, guys. Luis, that was a nice, long, strategic game. Thanks for sharing that. Let's see if Ryan has a game. If not, I can have someone else. Okay, so I still haven't heard from Ryan. So if Ryan is not there, who was requesting a game? I think Sai was requesting a game. Sai, you can send me a game if you want to. Let's put it this way. I mean, we have already done with the first game. Whoever sends me the first game, I will look at your game. Just email it to me. And whoever's game I get first, it'll be their game that I will analyze. And we'll keep it simple that way. Luis, you did use your space advantage to the best. I have to say that you won this game mainly because of your space advantage and your strong bishop. Ryan, I'm not sure what you're saying about, please. I don't have your game yet. If you give me your game, I will look at it. Did anyone else manage to send me a game? Oh, it is in chat. That's right. Ryan says his game is in chat, which I forgot. Let's go back. Ryan, okay, finally we got his game. Let me see if I can pull up that chat and get the PGN of the game. Okay, let's see if I'm gonna go all the way back, try to get rid of this game and post it. Okay, looks like we got Ryan's game. So go all the way back. All right, so someone else can send it too. Ryan's game was here, so I'm going to look at this. But after that, if someone else has a game and if you have time, we can do it. But I don't know if we'll have enough time. Okay. There's a good opening trap, says Raghav. We can see your games, guys. By the way, again, we will maybe next week I'll switch it up a little bit. I've been asking quizzes and other things. Maybe I'll set up different kind of puzzles to solve for you guys to see it. But eventually, yes, I would like to look at all of your games. But it's also nice to look at some strong games because all of us can learn from it, right? So don't worry about that. All right, so Ryan is saying he played as black and he says he had to take a draw. Why did he have to take a draw, Ryan? Okay, so we have the, I mean, it starts almost like the King's Indian, but Knight C3. I mean, this is kind of important to pay attention to, Ryan. I don't know if you're familiar with this and you went to Bishop G7 or... so you wanted to play the match against New York and that's why you were able to make the draw. You're not familiar with this. Okay. Knight C3 is actually changing this queen pawn opening into a king pawn opening. So let's see if all of you can pay attention to this and understand. Openings are a little more confusing because of transpositions, right? So typically what's the difference between a queen pawn opening and a king pawn opening? Let's say between, let's talk about this particular example, right? So I'll show you modern defense or, you know, Perk defense. So for example, E4, D6, D4, yeah, and then G6. There's also different move orders of knight F6. Maybe I'll play knight F6, attacking the pawn, knight C3, and G6, knight F3, and bishop G7. So this is typically the Perk or modern defense. And what has happened here is white has the typical center, and the two knights are out here, right? The most important thing though of all that you need to remember is that this pawn is on c2, right? And that makes a huge difference in how you understand the position, right? Let's go back. Now let's look at the typical King's Indian. d4, knight f6, c4, and you play d6, knight c3, and you play g6. Well, by the way, d6 is not the move order. I just played d6. I used to play old Indians long time ago, so I played d6. But okay, g6 is the move order. After knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, and let's say knight f3. Now you got the same exact setup. Just look at the pawn, right? The difference is where the pawn is, and this makes a lot of difference, right? Now sometimes players don't understand why this is such an important. Now if you look at the plans on both sides, there are some moves you can simply dismiss, and I have seen these in games. I'll show you a quick example before we go through the game. For example, the usual King's Indian setup goes like this, right? So let's say I castle, bishop e2, knight c6, castle. I'll just show the basic structure, e5, d5. By the way, e5 happens first, I believe. So you got this structure, yeah? So look at this. We got this structure, and this is usually a typical pawn chain structure. What we know about these pawn chains is that the pawn that's in the front for white and the pawn that's in front for black, they are the ones that decide the direction in which you're playing. So white plays on the queen side. Why? The pawn in the front has more space and is pointing in that direction, giving you more space on that side. Harish is talking about bayonet attack. That's right. Yes, there is b4. There are so many variations in King's Indian, right? And the pawn pointing this side, you're going to play on this side. Now, this is how typically it works. Now, let's see how white can pursue on this side and how black can pursue that side. And that typically happens on the base of the pawn chain, right? If you see a base of the pawn chain, you have to try to establish a pawn break. And you kind of build on it. And that's how your pawn chains will expand. For example, black can go f5. White obviously cannot do that, because if he does that, his pawn chain will collapse. White might solidify his pawn chain like this at some point, and black will expand. And now black has even more space on the king side. The same way, black can do the same. I mean, white can do the same. You go here. I already have a pawn backing it up, so I won't take it. White can push further too if he wants to. And white expands on the queen side. Now you got a good idea of what the plan for King's Indian is based on the pawn chain. Now let's go to Perk or modern defense, right? And let's see how that would be different. So e4, d6. Now I have a small question to everyone. Again, this happened in one of my games. Let's see who can answer this best. Let's say bishop e2 is played, castle, castle. I'm just going to play normal move. Let's say at some point, I don't know if I can play. Okay, let's play knight c6, bishop here, e5. Now I just have a simple question. Is d5 a good move for white, or it's better for black? Based on what you know about the King's Indian and the plans, I want you to just tell me, would d5 be better for white or better for black? Let's see who can come up with this understanding. Based on what you learned in that opening, can you apply that to this one and understand the difference? Harish is saying no because the white pawn is a little bit behind. Let's see if anyone else wants to jump in. Not seeing any more answers yet. So I guess some of you are not so clear about what is going on. Black has a head start with f5. I'm going to say that's actually perfect, Harish. What is happening here is white will be way too slow. You will have a very normal King's Indian position, and you know your plan is to play c4 and c5, right? This is what we know as a plan. We already talked about it, right? Because my pawn chain is here and the base of my pawn chain is on d6, you definitely have to go c4 and c5, right? Arav is asking, is it good for white? No, Arav, it's actually the contrary, the opposite of that, right? We are just saying that black does the same plan that black would do in the king and pawn game. I mean, that's not king and pawn game, King's Indian defense, because that's the pawn chain and I will break it. whereas white will have a tough time achieving it. This pawn being on c4 makes a huge difference, because now I have to move this knight. But to move the knight, I need to save this pawn. And then I have to play c4, and then maybe move the knight back, and then play c5. So I'm like at least 2 or 3 moves behind. And these decisions can happen just with understanding, okay? So anyways, that's a small tidbit on this particular opening. Now, watch what happens, Ryan. Your opponent is trying to transpose this into modern defense. He is actually saying, I don't want this knight here. I don't want this pawn to go up. I'm going to play knight c3. By the way, just to summarize back in modern defense, I just want to complete this. White will never play d5 for that reason. That's just a bad idea. I will leave the pawn right there, or I will take this. But I would just not play d5, because strategically that's just worse for white, and white should know that, right? That's the structure you get here. Okay, it was a simul with teacher, not stranger. Oh, okay. I didn't say it's a stranger, but I guess let's move on with the game again. So here, typically to stop this e4 idea, d5 is the most important response. Because they have committed this move, they cannot play c4 anymore, right? So in the usual Queen's Gambit structures, they play c4. But now, white has a commitment. White cannot play c4. These are still played lines. It's not so bad. But this is what you need to know as a difference. So if knight c3 happens, typical response is d5, and say, now you're not changing it to any e4 opening. You're saying this stays as a queen pawn opening. Nothing changes there. So let's move on. Okay, now you're playing the modern defense, just letting you know, or the pirk. And that's not a good idea. So the usual idea is to go c6, queen c7. You can try c5 or e5 ideas, but typically c6, b5, a5, queenside expansion is one of those ideas that you can play. So yeah, c6 I would say is more common than anything else. I'm actually kind of afraid you might run into e5 right away. Did you consider that white can play e5, Ryan? It seems to me that that could be a little bit of trouble already, because you've also kind of weakened your diagonal. I'm not so thrilled about that. For example, e5, maybe I don't think I'll capture. Maybe black has to do something like this. I don't know if e6 is already possible. If worst case scenario, I might just do this. But okay, it's still playable, but seems like black is a little suspicious. Okay, you tried the double fianchetto. Let's see that. Okay, I think it did work so far. You have developed all your pieces. c5 and d5. So okay, good and bad. I don't like your bishop. I think that's stuck in a really bad place. When you have structure like this bishop is absolutely useless, pointing towards a d5 square, right? So that's the biggest problem in this position. So okay, again, it's not lost or anything. It's very subtle, small things. a5. See, this is a problem. He plays this. One more reason why I don't like the bishop here is because it's not even easy for me to try to play that b5 move. Your bishop is being useless in this diagonal. It's also blocking your b file, and it's not allowing you to play b5, right? Imagine if that bishop was here. That will be much better for you to play b5. You will play like rook b8 and then play b5. So bishop would be better on d7 in such a structure. So let's see. So you're not able to play b5, and he's continuously getting a better situation. This move I will be a little careful about. It's good. I think trade is going to favor black, because clearly space is a problem. White has a lot more space and black has a lot of pieces, right? And getting rid of some of them is going to help. But the plan for white is typically to play f4 and e5, right? We have talked about this a little bit. If you have more space, you kind of expand. And here the pawn break would be on e5 towards this pawn. And to play f4, I have to kind of get rid of my knight. So when you play knight e5, you're kind of helping me with that. So you have to watch out for that. But okay, now you took with a pawn and you permanently stopped it, so that's okay. Now the only thing that's left is maybe this knight should come to d6. I think that knight is really not well placed on h5. Okay. Queen e2, knight f4. Okay, so I guess this is a very bad move for white. And at this point, I would say your position is... unless, I'm sorry. I cannot completely call it a bad move. I forgot that this pawn's hanging. Ryan, did you think about protecting that pawn? Let's see who can tell me a good move. Why not bishop takes? I think bishop takes was played in the game. Who can tell me a good move for this? There is no rush. Remember, in a closed position, one good thing is you can play slow. You want to open the king of bishop a6. I see what you're trying to do there. Okay, I'm going to go back to that f3 idea that you had. But let me ask someone, how, if let's say Ryan decided to save this pawn, what should black do? Rook a8, Santosh is rook a8, and queen c8, Luis. Ryan, yes, I'll come to your f3 variation in a bit. I'm glad nobody suggested a5. Thank you. That's like the positional suicide. Yeah, you don't want to give up these light squares like that. I know it's a simple move saving your pawn, but that's an awesome square for the knight. So you don't want to do that. In fact, I might think this is okay. Just rook a8, it's okay, just to save the pawn and read out the knight. Now let's hear what Ryan is talking about. He's talking about knight f4, bishop takes, pawn takes, which is what happened in the game. And he played f3. So it's a nice intermediate move, yeah? Because the queen is tied down to this bishop. And he is using that to ruin white's kingside pawn structure. But unfortunately, I don't think it's enough, Ryan. See, I come back to the same point. When is an attack dangerous? When is this king going to feel like, oh my god, I am in trouble, right? When you have space, when you have active pieces, and stuff like that. So right now, you can barely bring any piece to attack this king. So in fact, I'm thinking I might not even need to take that. But I could if I want to. But like, even if I play, let's say, queen c4, I'm not sure if your threats are strong enough for me to be worried. I mean, you take on g2 is really not much, because I take and you take, and that pawn's mine for me to recapture anytime. And with no real pieces next to my king, I don't really see why this king should be in any danger at all, right? So, Ryan, going back to the question is, when you get this kind of a situation, you're saying, you know what? I can sacrifice my pawn for an attack, or I could simply protect my pawn. You are making a tough decision here, right? And this decision is based on your assessment of the end position. And that end position happens to be this one. So you have to assess this one. So you saw up to f3 and you're excited because f3 looks good. I know you like attacking, but you have to evaluate a position to say, do you have the attack, right? And here I would say that you don't have the attack, and you should evaluate that too, right? A lot of strong players, attacking players exist in the world. I mean, world champions, Mikhail Tal, right? Great attacking players, but it's also that they play great end games. They play great middle game positions, right? You cannot decide attack based on your wish. You're like, oh, okay, you know what? Today I feel like attacking my opponent. I'm going to go attack, right? Chess usually doesn't work that way. You have to have the position that dictates an attack, and then you can just jump into it. So as of now, I do not see a reason to attack the king. Black does not have resources to attack the king, so probably not a great idea, okay? So let's see what happens. So you lost, you're down 2 pawns right now. But okay, maybe some chances to attack, and you're trying queen f4, and you played queen d3. In fact, maybe queen f1 was also possible, and you take this pawn, I go queen g2. Again, a great example of why there is really no attack, or actually rook e3. Now, and even ruining my pawn structure here will only make it worse for you, because now I can start attacking you on this pawn as well. I know this pawn is a little bit weak, but overall I just think not enough. So let's see what happened. Queen d3 and bishop here. So now You actually achieve this check, but look at that. It's that simple. Like, get out of the way. Right? Even with this biggest achievement for you to get to h2, you're still not having enough. So he runs and you play f5. I think f5 is the most natural response. I like that. Rook h1. Okay, so that... Okay, you played queen f4. Why not maybe capture? I know you were not in a mood to trade queens, but I think capture would have ruined his pawn structure completely, right? Because he cannot take back with the pawn. f2 is hanging, just to let everyone know. So I have to maybe take with the queen, almost, because if I take with the knight, you just go back queen f4. And I think you still continue to attack. So queen e4, then I play queen f4. I mean, you're down 2 pawns, but look at white's pawn structure, you know. Not a bad thing. I think you're at least going to win 1 pawn back. I think at this point, I mean, black is still probably fighting for a draw, but maybe with some realistic chances. Like, for example, queen takes f4, rook takes f4. You have a chance to pick up one of the pawns. And you also have a chance to ruin my structure even more. So... Luis is saying rook h1 was not necessary, but it's not so easy, Luis. I think at this point, after f5, if you don't play rook h1, I think your king will have to answer a lot of questions. So I don't actually see any move other than rook h1 here. The whole point for white is, I think white unnecessarily complicated the position. I mean, white could have given up this f3 pawn. Again, a bad judgment. Right? Just to hold on to this pawn, white is allowing all this attack. But if you had gone queen f1, this move is not even a real threat because you will simply play this move. So I think white should have just given 1 pawn back for a much better position. So going back again, f5, and so queen f4 probably not the best because see, you don't want him to take back with a pawn. If that happens, your opponent is up 2 solid pawns, right? That's too much. But he is still allowing you to do this. Maybe he needed to defend this pawn somehow. Maybe rook f1 was more of a requirement. Oh, maybe queen e3 looks good. Because pawn captures, yeah? So if pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4, and or actually pawn takes e4. Yeah, pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4, and it looks like white's completely better. Okay, he plays rook here. You got to take it. Actually, I like bishop d4. Let's stick to bishop d4. Let's see what happens. You somehow managed an attack out of nowhere, which I like. You like to attack and you got it. Why are we still not taking on e4? I know you don't like it because you don't want to think of that queen trade. But I think opening up the f file is required. What is rook f6 really threatening? Do you have a threat here, Ryan? I don't know if really we have any realistic threat. I do have to say that you've gotten back into this game to a reasonable extent, which is not bad. But you have to still play with realistic threats. If e6 was your threat, start with e6. If e6 is what you want to do, again, you are playing in a position where you have to play more aggressive. You know, you have to call the shots. You can start with e6 directly because if he takes, you can play rook here, you know. But you have to watch it for knight d5 moves. Mahir is here. Okay, Mahir, good. So I still think maybe at some point you capture and let him take with the queen and just go back, you know. Oh, actually, you cannot go back here because queen e6 check, yeah. Maybe queen. Actually, queen e6 check is bad. If he plays queen e6 check, you take, and then you simply win that pawn. Maybe even win more pawns. I don't know. I mean, like, again, but actually takes and c3. Yeah, white is still going to consolidate at least 1 pawn. We kind of know that. Black has too much to fight back. At least 1 pawn white's going to keep. So let's see what happened in the game. h5, g5, and rook. Okay, maybe just h6 now seems simple enough. Your opponent has definitely given up all the dark squares. I think today's game analysis seems very relevant in terms of blocks of squares. I think all the dark squares seem to be very strong. So this h6 move probably comes in very handy now, Ryan. You see how you're dropping this pawn. Well, actually not dropping this pawn, but having problems with that pawn. Rook f1, rook takes d5, and finally c3. So looks like finally the piece is getting trapped. Do we have a chance to get out of this? Bishop f2, rook f2, rook takes d3. No, it doesn't look. Wait, bishop f2, rook f2, queen f2. Yeah, so you're winning an exchange. So you did pick up an exchange. That's right. I just realized that queen f2, guys. By the way, look at this. This is a cool tactic because knight cannot capture back because of the pin, which means this is knight takes g5 check. It says 1-0. Did you lose on time, Ryan? Looks like he lost on time. But he did come back in this position to some extent. For example, okay, my guess, probably still a drawn game because black is about to lose this pawn maybe. Because I might have to go like king somewhere this side. I mean, I might be able to go here, but I'm too... Oh, you drew the game, okay? So you drew the game, that's right. Oh, you know what happened? The result says 1-0 from Coach Luis's game that I loaded before. And the names are still showing as the same thing. And I was wondering, why is it 1-0 after knight g5? So you agree to a draw. Yeah, rook d2 check, picking up this pawn, but white does have this pawn and like some practical chances. Black should be better. White has chances to make draws. But going back, I have to say that it's too dangerous to play like this. So actually, for example, maybe queen c4, and maybe can black really break through? Now c3 is a real threat, and white might be winning here. Even here, I might be winning. I don't see any clear tactics anymore. See how dark squares belong to black, but light squares belong to white. And the knight on e4 and rook on g4 are actually super strong. I'm actually not sure how you can defend against c3. I think this is probably very, very dangerous and probably lost. Well, bishop takes b2. I still plan to play c3, guys. So Santosh wants to take the pawn. Not bad. But once I play c3, look at your bishop, yeah? So it's totally gone. You're never really coming back into the game, and I'm sure I will win that back now or at some point. So overall, I don't think it's possible. Anyways, it was a pretty good game, Ryan. I think one lesson from this game that you have to remember is that an attack on the king has to be justified. You cannot just decide that, right? And sometimes we might make a bad call and choosing an attack which doesn't exist. But the more and more you get better at understanding this, you will choose the attacking situations that really, really win for you, right? And you will not go into attacking situations that won't win for you. Excellent. We had a great 2 games analyzed this week. Thanks for joining all of you guys. We have our Challenger chess coach tomorrow. Last week we didn't have that because we had a conflict with the Blitz game and other things. But we are going to have our Challenger chess coach. So you guys can show up at 6 o'clock tomorrow. From 6 to 7, you will be able to challenge me and our other chess coaches and play some fun games. And that's about it. I guess I'll sign off now. Thanks for sharing your games. Hope you all had a good time.